All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to today's Urgent Intelligence Explainer. Whether you're a national security advisor, a top-level policymaker, or just a focused learner tracking global stability, the information we are unpacking today is absolutely critical. We're looking at a fundamental shift in global security, specifically analyzing recent intelligence regarding China's rapid nuclear buildup. I'm going to guide you through the latest source data, the strategic implications, and frankly, the stark realities of this entirely new geopolitical landscape. So let's get started. Here is our roadmap for this briefing. We'll quickly cover current intelligence on the buildup, look at SIPRI's estimates and the critical unknowns, break down the strategic implications of theater missiles, and analyze the doctrine shift toward nuclear blackmail. Finally, we'll hit the threats to regional allies and those compounding escalation risks. To give you the bottom line up front, check out this quote from National Security Council official Pranay Vadi from June of 2024. He notes that adversarial regimes are expanding their arsenals at a breakneck pace. The source data emphasizes that China, along with Russia and North Korea, are coordinating in ways we haven't really seen before, and it's challenging global stability. We're talking about an unprecedented acceleration here. This goes way beyond traditional modernization. Okay, Section 1. Let's look at the current intelligence and actually try to quantify this shift. 620. That is the accepted baseline number. It's the Stockholm International Peace Research Institute's, or SIPRI's, estimate of China's known nuclear warheads. Now, according to our sources, this marks the absolute fastest nuclear buildup since the Cold War. Richard Fisher from the International Assessment and Strategy Center points out that this 620 count is totally plausible when you line it up with standard Pentagon China military power reports. But as you'll see, that number alone really doesn't tell the whole story. Because that baseline 620 count, it masks some incredibly critical unknowns. Let's look at what's beyond the baseline. The crucial point we have to understand is what standard reports might actually be leaving out. The source analysis points to two massive intelligence gaps. First, insights from a 2025 book by engineer Hui Zhang reveal an entirely new generation of small nuclear warheads. And second, standard reports often just don't account for the smaller theater missile warheads in the People's Liberation Army inventory. You know, these aren't your massive traditional intercontinental ballistic missiles. They are totally different tools entirely. And Fisher's projection really illustrates the scale of this gap. He assesses that the hidden inventory of these smaller theater missile warheads could be close to 1,000. Think about that for a second. If an unaccounted for inventory of 1,000 tactical warheads exists out there, it fundamentally rewrites the threat landscape in the Asia-Pacific region. It shifts the balance of power in ways that public counts simply are not capturing. So, what does this mean on the ground? Let's dive into the strategic implications and the tactical reality of these theater missiles. Well, let's define exactly what we're talking about. A theater arsenal is made up of smaller, highly accurate battlefield nuclear weapons. They're intended for regional operational use, not, global annihilation. As Peter Husey from the National Institute for Deterrence Studies points out in the source text, Russia made a very similar pivot back in 1999 to build these low-yield, super-accurate weapons. Analysts assess that China is now adopting this exact same model, which effectively lowers the threshold for nuclear use and represents a huge, direct threat to Asian democracies. And this tactical shift directly enables a terrifying doctrinal shift, redefining deterrence into active nuclear blackmail. For practically the entire nuclear age, the foundational philosophy was mutual deterrence, right? The weapons existed to prevent war. But our sources are highlighting a massive strategic departure from that. Analysts like Husey assess that in the hands of regimes like China, Russia, and North Korea, these weapons have transitioned away from being instruments of deterrence and have become instruments of active coercion and blackmail. They aren't just a shield to hide behind anymore, they're being wielded as a geopolitical sword. Just listen to this quote from retired U.S. Air Force General John Hyten. He calls this the escalate to win, escalate to end strategy. And the scary part is, we have already seen the proof of concept for this. The source text draws a direct parallel to Vladimir Putin, who explicitly utilized the threat of his nuclear arsenal right before the 2022 invasion of Ukraine. By threatening nuclear use, he successfully deterred Western states from supporting Ukraine as fully as they initially planned to. According to the source material's assessment, China is actively observing this and adopting the exact same playbook. So let's look at how this strategy of coercion is already being put into practice against regional allies. Despite China's official no first use pledge, the historical record mapped out by our sources shows a really clear escalating pattern of attempted coercion. Just look at the timeline.
In July 2021, threats were directed at Japan for supporting Taiwan. In September 2021, similar threats were made toward Australia regarding the AUKUS coalition. And then, in March 2022, there were promises of worst consequences for anyone helping Taiwan defend itself. I mean, this is nuclear blackmail right out in the open.
Based on the source data, we can see a clear targeting matrix. When the geopolitical temperature rises, the nations most directly in the crosshairs of this coercive strategy are Taiwan, Japan, the Philippines, and Australia. The strategic implication is completely clear here. Those theater arsenals we were discussing earlier, they are purpose-built to intimidate these specific regional democracies, essentially forcing them to back down in the face of an ultimatum. Of course, all of this regional intimidation ultimately compounds a much broader danger: the risks of miscalculation and escalation. We are facing a severe systemic vulnerability right now, which is a massive transparency gap. The United States maintains comprehensive disclosure of its arsenal's size and composition. But conversely, the rapid buildup by China, Russia, and North Korea is shrouded in absolute secrecy. This lack of transparency, combined with China's refusal to even engage in arms control discussions, actually led the previous U.S. administration to let the New START arms reduction treaty expire. It just became untenable to limit U.S. weapons with Russia, while China rapidly expanded entirely in the dark. I really want to draw your attention to this stark warning from SIPRI to summarize our findings today. As states rely more and more heavily on nuclear weapons as everyday instruments of national power, which reverses decades of arms reduction, by the way, the risk of a catastrophic miscalculation rises exponentially. When you combine 1,000 hidden theater warheads, a doctrine of nuclear blackmail, and total secrecy, the margin for error effectively disappears entirely. So I want to leave you with this provocative question, especially for the policymakers watching this explainer. If the era of passive deterrence is over, and we have truly entered an era of active nuclear blackmail and coercion, how must the United States and its allies fundamentally adapt their deterrence strategy? The data is clear. The shift has already happened, and a time to formulate a strategic response is right now. Thank you for engaging with this intelligence explainer. Take this data, review the findings, and let it inform your strategic planning moving forward.